Welcome to DRTSPR show. This is Dr. Tangella Shiva Prasad Reddy alias Dr. TSPR. Namaste, Adab. Hello and a wonderful guest again, D. Narasimha Reddy Garu. Before we start, an important issue on electoral bonds. How electoral bonds have been very crucial in exposing corruption, quid pro quo, and we will raid you so that you have to pay us money, only then the case is withdrawn or temporarily it is out. You pay us, only then we will give you contracts. Is this the way political parties should be funded? It is shame. It is nothing but destruction of democracy. And how even gaming apps, lottery kings, that fellow says his origin is from Tamil Nadu. He funds both DMK and BJP as well as Congress and Mamata party, TMC party. And where is this money coming from? Is it not from Chinese gaming apps? That means China is going to control Indian democracy. Shame on these political parties and leaders. And Election Commission of India sleeping mode. And how can State Bank of India, how the hell that can be so, become so opaque, and shamelessly State Bank of India approaches Supreme Court asking for time to reveal when Supreme Court said no. It is against the fundamental rights of the citizens that they should know the information, who is funding, from where this fund is coming. And because citizen is a voter, without understanding whether this money is corruption money or who is behind these political parties or this candidate. Because constitution authority are the citizens of India. They have submitted constitution themselves. Rights and resources. Elections means no infringement of rights, no looting of resources. So looting of resources means corporate companies and all those criminals who are trying to go against the law in making money. That means indulging in corrupt practices and deals. And such people, if they are funding a political party and a representative, what would be the fate once they win and come to the parliament or assembly? What would happen to the people of this country, citizens of this country? That is the issue. I'll just show you. We are thankful to Supreme Court of India, but for everything should we go to Supreme Court? क्या हर एक चीज के लिए हम सुप्रीम कोर्ट जाना चाहिए? और हमारे दरिंदे ऐसे हैं यहाँ पर व्हाट्सएप और ये हमको कुछ लोगों को बताने की प्रक्रिया में व्हाट्सएप हो या इंस्टाग्राम हो या लिंक्डइन, ये बदमाशी कर रहे हैं. आप तक हमारे को समाचार पहुंचने की दिक्कत ये लोग कर रहे हैं. हम पहुंचने की कोशिश करते हैं लेकिन लोग दिक्कत पैदा कर रहे हैं. दे आर व्हाट्सएप, LinkedIn and all the social media platforms, they are creating problems. They are not allowing us to share vital, truthful information to the public. And Suomoto, Supreme Court should take care of these fellows. Right to privacy of political affiliation does not extend to contributions made to influence public policy. जो पैसा देता है राजनीतिक दल को और उनको कानून बनाने के लिए, विधानसभा में हो या लोकसभा में, पंचायत से लेके यही है. अगर ऐसे लोगों को कानून बनाने के लिए जो पैसा दे रहा इन राजनीतिक दल को, क्या उसका राज लोगों को पता नहीं चलना चाहिए? कितना गलत तरीका है, क्योंकि वो कानून हमारे लिए बनाते हैं लेकिन हमको समाचार नहीं देना चाहते हैं. कितनी गलत बात है. मोदी जी आप क्या कहते हैं, अमित शाह क्या कहते हैं आप, उसी तरह पूरे हर एक राजनीतिक दल, हम किसी को नहीं छोड़ रहे हैं. यहाँ राष्ट्र में हो या देश में, कैसे इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड, कैसा बिल को आपने सपोर्ट किया है, एंड अप्लाइज ओनली टू कंट्रीब्यूशंस बिलो द थ्रेशोल्ड. तो इसीलिए हम ये बताने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं आपको. Supreme Court rejects union's argument that citizens have no right to know about political funding. हमने खुलासा किया है, मोदी को चैलेंज किया है. वो एक इंटरव्यू में आके बताते कि हम ये इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड्स इसीलिए लाए ताकि काला धन को बाहर ले आए. लेकिन मोदी जी आपकी पोल खुल गई, क्योंकि आपने सुप्रीम कोर्ट में क्या कहा कि हमको कोई समाचार देने की जरूरत ही नहीं है लोग, नागरिक को. कितनी गलत बात है. यहां बाहर आके एक कहते हैं, वहां देखिए सुप्रीम कोर्ट के ऑफिशियल वेबसाइट से लिया मैं. सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा कि ये गलत है. सुप्रीम कोर्ट रिजेक्ट्स यूनियंस आर्गुमेंट दैट सिटीजंस हैव नो राइट टू नो अबाउट पॉलिटिकल फंडिंग. हु द हेल यू आर? अरे तू मेरे सेवक है भाई, प्रधानमंत्री से लेके मुख्यमंत्री तक सेवक रहे के हमारे ऊपर इस तरह की आप ये कर रहे क्या? अत्यवसर परिस्थिति ऑलरेडी ला चुके हैं, लागू हो गया क्या देश में? एक बार इंदिरा गांधी ने किया है, अब हिंदुत्व के नाम पे बीजेपी करना चाह रहा है क्या? हिंदू को क्या फायदा हुआ? हमने क्वेश्चन किया, यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड किधर गया? पॉपुलेशन कंट्रोल बिल किधर गया? टेम्पल्स आज भी एंडोमेंट में एक्ट में है, मास्क नहीं है, चर्चेस नहीं है। फिर आप बीफ जो गाय को जो करके बेचते हैं बाहर, उनसे पैसा लेते हैं बीजेपी। कहां का हिंदुत्व है? सुप्रीम कोर्ट delivered a historic judgment holding that anonymous electoral bonds violate the right to information under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. While holding this, the Constitution bench also upheld the voters' right to information about funding to a political party. तुम्हारी पोल खुल गई मोदी जी, खत्म हो गया है यहाँ। इसके बाद में भी आप बाहर आके कैसे लोगों को गुमराह कर रहे हैं? इसीलिए नागरिकों, ये सुप्रीम कोर्ट से मैं लिया। सुप्रीम कोर्ट में यूनियन गवर्नमेंट, मोदी गवर्नमेंट ने साफ कर दिया कि नागरिकों को कोई समाचार हम इलेक्ट्रल बॉन्ड के लिए नहीं देंगे, लेकिन सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा नहीं, ये उनका हक है, इसीलिए आप देना चाहिए, और एक है कि इलेक्ट्रल बॉन्ड को खत्म ही कर दिया। अब आपको मालूम है कौन सी पार्टी किस तरह कहां से ले रहा पैसे? ये जो लुटेरे हैं, जो भ्रष्टाचार है, उन सब से राजनीतिक दलों को पैसा मिला है। और ऐसी कंपनियां जो लॉस में है, जो मुनाफा बहुत कम है और मुनाफा ही नहीं है, करोड़ों रुपए दे रहे हैं आज बीजेपी को, दूसरे दल को भी। ये पैसा किसका है? ये काला धन नहीं होता मोदी जी? गलत तरीके से लोगों को गुमराह करिए, इसलिए ये शो काफी इंपॉर्टेंट है। सर प्लीज सर, लेट्स गो नाउ। आई वांटेड टू शो अनदर वन wherein I have a right. Very clearly, Supreme Court judge says expansion of right to free speech to include right to information crucial for elections. इसीलिए चुनाव के लिए सही समाचार आपको देना है, ये हमारे सुप्रीम कोर्ट की जस्टिस BR गवे ने भी कह दिया। इसीलिए हम समाचार दे रहे हैं, और समाचार देने में दिक्कत व्हाट्सएप, लिंक्डइन, इंस्टाग्राम और फेसबुक जैसे ये सामाजिक माध्यम हमको तकलीफ दे रहे हैं। इसके ऊपर भी सुप्रीम कोर्ट गौर करना चाहिए, क्योंकि सरकार जो है इनसे मिले हुए हैं, राष्ट्र का हो या केंद्र का। इसीलिए लोग जानकार हो जाइए, इनको भगाना चाहिए यहाँ से अगर हमारी समाचार आपको नहीं देना, ये व्हाट्सएप या कोई भी हो। प्लीज सर, गो अहेड।
Thank you, Dr. Shiva Prasad Reddy, for giving me an opportunity to be part of this presentation on electoral bonds. I have given a title which reads like this: Electoral Bond Scheme, Diabolical in Design and Deleterious to Democracy. I have chosen this expression diabolical deliberately, particularly by watching what has been coming out of the judgment and the following revelation relating to that of the electoral bonds and the connection to that of political parties funding. I mean, a dictionary meaning of diabolical, I think, is exactly what I mean. For instance, it tastes devilish. It also says wholly bad or wrong in intention. It talks in terms of unholy evil. I want to justify why we call that. And I also link it with that of, by design, from every step, right from the way in which it was introduced and the way in which they fought to obstruct the revealing of information by the Supreme Court, trying to say that people have no right to know the funding of political parties, and on the contrary, arguing that contributors have right to privacy. They can contribute anything but still keep their privacy. This is a cunningness of first order. That's why I think it's not an emotional kind of, let's say, title, this is diabolical design. It's a systematic design. It penetrates into that of every section of operation of the present government. All the departments, I think you find are open to that of corruption. There is a larger kind of economic system or regime under which these are possible, namely that of neoliberal regime, where you praise the competition and then progress through that of free investments and access to markets without any regulation. That's of course the larger framework into which I do not want to go, but I'm only hinting at it is in this framework all these are possible. You can do amendments to that of Income Tax Act, you can amend, let's say, People's Representation Act, all this within the framework of, let's say, neoliberalism. Let's keep that away. Let's come to that of why we say the right from the beginning till the present. I mean, more things are coming in. This particular act is evil, and it smacks of, let's say, total contempt for morality in administration, and then brings in a lot of corrupt kind of, let's say, practices in the name of, let's say, transparency, which is, I think, hardly there. To begin with, for instance, the way in which this particular scheme is introduced. We know that Arun Jaitley, when he was finance minister, wanted to bring in, and in fact, before bringing this scheme, they wrote both to the Ministry of Company Affairs and also Reserve Bank of India. On 28th January, the finance minister wrote to the RBI. RBI replied on 30th January that this kind of a scheme will open doors to that of corruption and money laundering, misuse, illegal kind of practices. They objected to this. The scheme is not likely to be transparent. It doesn't serve the objective of, let's say, regulating black money or whatever that they were trying to put. Same thing happened with that of, let's say, company affairs, because the scheme is proposing that contributions could be made by individuals, corporations, including that of foreign corporations with their affiliates in India, and that of, let's say, associations. It said it's not only individuals, corporations. If you bring in the affiliates of the foreign companies, there would be huge possibility of money laundering, not only within the country, but from across the country. Funds could come from different places to spoil, or let's say, spoil the elections, or spoil the, let's say, the process of democratic kind of process. These objections were there on table on 30th January, but the minister went on 1st February introducing the scheme. The scheme was introduced in Lok Sabha. And then it meant amending, let's say, People's Representation Act, Income Tax Act. And the Lok Sabha, they had majority. They didn't have majority in Rajya Sabha. They started calling this as a money bill. They introduced this, the money bill, but money bill applies only to that of public money. If you have, let's say, taxes and income, expenditure of the government, these are considered to be, from the finance point of view, money bills. But since there is a contribution to that, private parties are not part of the government in that sense. They are, until they come to power, they are part of, let's say, public. And therefore, that cannot be called as money bill. But they brush through saying it's money bill. They didn't take it to that Rajya Sabha where they didn't have majority. And therefore, the very introduction of this scheme has been in a way that it could be called as through the back door. And once it was introduced, and in fact, the announcement on January, I mean, that's, it was in February, 1st February 17, all these amendments took time, and it was introduced as a electoral bond scheme on 2nd, let's say, 2nd, 2018. And according to the introduction, that the bonds will be issued by the State Bank of India, and the bonds will be in the denomination of, interestingly, 1,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakhs, and 1 crore. And now we know most of the bonds that were bought were in the denomination of 1 crore. 90% of the bonds purchased are of 1 crore denomination, I think. because the idea is they wanted to show that people can democratically participate. People like me also can buy 1,000 or 10,000 bonds and give it to my own favorite. No, none of those things. By design, they know that it will be 1 crore denomination and beginning, and then the method of introduction is that every quarter, 10 days. That means first quarter begins with January in a year, and then it is 10 days in January, 10 days in the second quarter, that is April, 10 days in the third quarter, that is July, 10 days in the fourth quarter, October. That means 40 days in a year. They will, let's say, open up. And this will be done through that of branches of the State Bank of India, which is confined to only 29 across the country. You can buy these bonds for these 10 days every quarter. And then they also added in the times of Lok Sabha election, another 30 days, the bonds could be sold. That means in a year, if there is an election year, it's not only 40 days, 70 days, these 29 branches of State Bank of India open for, let's say, purchase of electoral bonds. And if the bonds purchased, or of course they are supposed to be, someone purchases, he could give it to any political party. It is like any transaction in terms of bonds. So anybody can, let's say, take it and then encash it. And therefore, the time limit given is once the bond is purchased, within 15 days, it should be given to someone, and the person who party receiving it also should encash it in 15 days. Otherwise, it will go to Prime Minister's relief fund, and not much has gone. Everybody is encashed. And there is a huge kind of, let's say, now we know that. When it comes to the question of, they also started trying to suggest that it is largely anonymous. It protects, let's say, the contributors, and that doesn't reveal who is buying and who is buying, how much can be known, but it cannot be linked to that. It cannot be matched to that of to whom he is giving. Therefore, the parties which are buying, or let's say the corporations or individuals buying, their affiliation need not be linked to that of a party. It's not revealed. That is the argument made. But as we go on, that's not the way in which it has happened. Therefore, I think right from the beginning, there are objections, not only RBI, not only the company affairs, it is also public domain, that many people concerned with that of democratic process thought this would be violative of, let's say, the basic principles of democracy, where there is whole of political process is open to that of public gaze. This public must know who is getting what and which party is getting donations. And that's how I think in October 17 itself, let's say, even though they have pushed through the bill in, let's say, February 17, in October 17, there were a series of, let's say, public interest litigations filed. That 3 important filing of litigations is, one is from the association, that's the Association for Democratic Rights, or you can call democratic, is called as famously IDA. And then the other one is, let's say, the Common Cause, that's another NGO. And then, of course, the Communist Party of India, Marxist, also filed a public interest litigation in the court. And that was in October 2017. But it didn't get, let's say, much of attention. Initially, it was into a 3-member bench, I think, which went through this. During this process, the 3-member bench of Supreme Court, in its order in April 12, 2019, suggested that until the final judgment is brought out and final hearing is made, all the electoral bonds information bonds sold and let's say bonds encashed until let's say April 12th, 2019 should be given to that of Election Commission in a sealed cover. That's a very interesting kind of a thing. That's why we find even now whether the bonds sold between let's say the 2nd January 18 to that of let's say February, I mean that's what is that, April 12, 2019, whether they are still available in the public domain is still what happened to that sealed cover? That question mark remains now. But I think later it went to that 5-judge bench, and that the 5-judge bench, which I think heard the kind of let's say submissions for 4 years, it took its own time. And ultimately, in November 2023, they reserved a judgment and came out with a judgment on 15th February 2024. I mean, the judgment is quite revealing because although it's delayed, I mean, it could have been before 2019 elections itself, but I think they took their own time. But the judgment now reveals several things. The Supreme Court not only referred to that of, let's say, the entire process, to begin with that of right to information under 19(1)(a), violation of that is violation of the constitutional provisions. And then it went on to point out several other, no, it also affects the Companies Act, Income Tax Act, and then it promotes, it also came very heavily on the kind of processes that it would unleash. And they said it would be totally against that of a democratic process. It's not only unconstitutional. And in fact, there were interesting arguments. This is what in the beginning, there was a presentation relating to that of 2 important arguments made by the Solicitor General of India. He said the first argument was very, what could be clever and cunning argument. The first argument is that when it comes to the question of, let's say, electoral bonds, it is likely to be, if you reveal the electoral bonds given by people, you are likely to expose people's privacy right. In fact, very interestingly, like devil, that's why right from the beginning I'm saying devil, like devil quoting the scriptures, the argument quoted by the Solicitor General of India was in the famous Puttaswamy case of 2017, that they argued that there is a right to privacy is a fundamental right.
Yeah.
That's a huge judgment. It quoted that. It says the right of the person who is contributing has a privacy and it's a fundamental right. And therefore, if you say that it should be put in public domain or information, it would be a violation of this fundamental right. The court made a very fine line of distinction between what could be a person's fundamental right to privacy is different from what could be the right of a person who is giving huge money as a part of a quid pro quo. They said that if you think you have to protect the right of a person's privacy, there was already a provision that up to 20,000 rupees you could donate without revealing your identity. That channel is open. It pointed out it was there already. But if you are giving crores of rupees to influence policy, that is not privacy. That's a destruction of public policy, actually, you are amending. Therefore, they said this argument doesn't hold. The second argument, that is about that there is nothing constitutionality about it. There is no right to information. That they started, let's say, referring to the question of this particular article, which perhaps gives right to that of information. The pointing out that in the People's Representation Act, the provision is that people must know whom they are voting to. and therefore what they are. That's where there is a provision under People's Representation Act that every candidate must file details about, let's say, his income, his, let's say, background and total wealth, and then all that. That is, let's say, in the open domain. That's the very first requirement. That's a voter must know whom he is voting. Second, if you are saying that it is the kind of, let's say, right to information doesn't go to that of, let's say, parties, it is part of the party. The party's funds also should be in the open domain. You can't say that how much money is coming from where to that of a political party. And therefore they struck down both the arguments. They upheld the right to information under the 19(1)(a), and then it said that the very proposal of electoral bond scheme is unconstitutional. I mean, then, of course, when it comes to the question of, I mean, this is the arguments itself. Specifically, we are talking about the morally depraving kind of arguments. You know that these are the basic requirements, and then still you bring in very immoral kind of, let's say, propositions. And also, when it comes to the question of the judgment comes on February 15th, but the way in which that there is a State Bank of India was asked to, let's say, give all the information relating to the donors and those who have received that of, let's say, Election Commission within, let's say, 6th of March. But the State Bank comes on 5th and says that it cannot give information because very difficult. But every citizen knows what the banks does at the end of the day. Every day, every branch matches the accounts, what it has come, where it has come, and then they close it. It's a cumulative process and is done every branch. All that has to be done, in this case, only 29 branches across the country, and your information ready. And then the State Bank has the temerity. And this is what happens is, does the State Bank on its own act like that? It said that it required 3 months till July 1st, 30th, which means that until these elections are over, they didn't say that openly, that everybody knows that. The way in which the bank is made to say that. I would say that bank did not say, the bank is made to. Bank is an instrument now. Although it's a public domain, while public money is there, they must be responsible to that of depositors. But ultimately there are bosses controlling it. And therefore the bank under some instruction must have said that it requires 3 months. But I think the reprimand from the Supreme Court that this doesn't require so much of time, you must give it by, let's say, 12th. They've given it by 12th. Within, let's say, 5 days, they have given the information. But how they gave the second step? They have given all the information to that of Election Commission, but they didn't reveal one of the critical things that this is where the cunningness comes. The government has been arguing the donor is anonymous donor, he will not be revealed, and then the person who is receiving donations will not be known. So you will have donations by ABCD persons, receipts or encashment of these donations by ABCD parties. The matching, who gave to whom, will not be known. But I think this is where the crookedness comes. But there is an information. That's what the Supreme Court said. Give the so-called alphanumerical numbers. It is the alpha numerical number, which I think the purchaser's code is there. And then it also matches with that. Whoever encashes, this number will be there. ABCD people have ABCD kind of, let's say, bonds they have encashed. Their information is there. Only after, I think it says time limit, but I don't know. Let me
last 10 minutes. Last 10 minutes. Take it, sir. No problem.
Okay. When it comes to the question of, let's say, this part, that they wanted to show that it's transparent. Now it reveals that it's possible to match. And that's how the whole information is coming in. How immoral. I mean, in fact, we are able to say with confidence, it is a devilish act, immoral act, because this so-called alphanumerical number exposes, no? That means the government, the finance ministry under which the state bank works, can at any time, under the direction of the ruling party, reveal this information to that of ruling party as to not only how much donations they are getting, but how much other parties are coming. This leads to, let's say, several ways in which you can harass. And therefore, we know now that once this information is revealed, that there are series of things that are happening. This is given, first of all, as some kind of, let's say, quid pro quo. Let's say you want to get some kind of benefits, and then you give donations to that party. And then when it comes to the question of, let's say, even it can influence on the basis of donations, the public policy itself. When this is what happens, you can perhaps bribe and then, let's say, argue for, let's say, heavy kind of duties on importing some of your competitors. All this can happen. And the other one is, of course, this information can also unleash on those who are giving to other parties. You can unleash, let's say, ED, IT, and other kinds of agencies to harass them. And in fact, it can also go to the extent of you use this to extract more money from people whom you think that they have resources. You can push your ED into action. Therefore, what we have is that there is a huge amount of, let's say, electoral bonds contribution. But I think I must make some kind of a precautionary statement before I go to this money contributed. This, I think, as the Prime Minister himself has started, let's say, joking, but it's a reality, it's not a joke. He said, what you get from electoral bonds to that of, let's say, BJP, something like 54% of what is so far revealed. It amounts to that of something like 8,500 crores or so. It is only like Kuchela giving the so-called rice flakes to Krishna. What it means is that this money is only paltry money for us. 8,500 crores for a party like BJP is just, let's say, tip of the iceberg. They need huge money. I mean, their own accounts show that in 2023, they have spent something like 28, that is the official account, 28,000 crores in that particular year. This 8,000 crores is nothing. I mean, that's official thing. We know that how money is spent and how money. What is interesting is in this long list we are going to briefly discuss, there is no money shown under either, let's say, Adani or, let's say, Ambani. The major so-called star industrialists or wealth creators in the country, there is no list, there is no contribution to electoral bonds. It only shows that there are other ways of doing it. Therefore, electoral bonds has come to us, to the public. It's one of the biggest handles that we have to attack how this particular government is trying to destroy all institutions and corrupt, let's say, every institution to the core. That is the strength that we have from the electoral bonds. And we are not trying to say the electoral bonds is the only means. If you ban the electoral bonds, that there would be some kind of effect on the ruling party's funds or other parties' funds. They have their own conventional way, and then we know that there is a huge money coming to them in various ways. The example is that the richest man has no money contributed through electoral bonds. Obviously, is contributing in a different way. Well, if taken into consideration, there is also some controversy here of the State Bank of India list from the day one to that of, let's say, 15th February. The total number of bonds shows 28,030. But I think the State Bank of India could give only information for something like 22,017. That means in between, that is from the date of introducing that scheme and up to the sealed cover business in 19. That is, I think, April 15, 19 or so. That information is not included in the so-called, let's say, electoral bonds that are given with that of alphanumerical numbers by the State Bank of India. That means still we have information to be revealed about 9,159 electoral bonds, maybe different denominations. Obviously, most of them are in 1 crore denominations. Leaving that, when it comes to the question of the nature of these things, that we are saying that it could be quid pro quo. I quickly run through, there is no time. For instance, when it comes to the question of benefits.
Or else we can divide into part 1 and part 2.
Okay, this I think we'll briefly refer to this and then we go to part 2 later, if that is possible. So we, for the present, see that if you take into consideration that we are trying to suggest and then it reveals that there is a lot of quid pro quo involved in these electoral bonds, because there is, as of now, the analysis made by Hindu has done a lot of homework, matching things with that of CMI corporate data. And they reported that something like 33 corporate groups together contributed 1,751 crores to BJP and got lakhs worth of contracts and other kinds of concessions for allotment of land, coal mines, things like that. This is a huge quid pro quo. And for example, for instance, closer, we can give the example of the mega engineering company. In total, they have contributed to different people, different parts for the same quid pro quo. That's 1,232 crores they have contributed electoral bonds. This mega from Andhra, Telangana. But in 2023, they gave 140 crores donation. And that was the time when Maharashtra needed a lot of money, and then they gave it to BJP, 140 crores, and got a contract of Thane Borivali twin tunnel for worth, let's say, 14,400 crores. I mean, you can match everything with the details, but we are saying this is the way in which quid pro quo has been going on. The other thing is that Hindu has also looked into 45 companies, I mean, out of which.
So what we'll do is, I'll stop you here. We'll go for part 2, because now we'll continue day after day, daily. So what I suggest you is, here we have exposed what electoral bonds is. लोगों के सामने सब कुछ है. हमने आज खुलासा किया है विस्तार से किस तरह गुमराह किया गया. इलेक्ट्रल बॉन्ड जो है एक छोटी सी मामला है. जब भारतीय जनता पार्टी 223 में 18,000 करोड़ खर्च कर सकती है, तो इलेक्ट्रल बॉन्ड्स का हिस्सा क्या है और बाकी का पैसा कहां से आ रहा है, किस तरह आ रहा है, तो हम दूसरी पार्ट में आपको पूरी समझाएंगे. तो ये हम यही रुकते हैं आज. कल के लिए हम दूसरी पार्ट आपको लेके आएंगे. आप DRTSPR चैनल, सिटीजन DRTSPR चैनल और एनवायरमेंट पीपल DRTSPR चैनल्स को सपोर्ट कीजिए, सब्सक्राइब भी कीजिए. राइट सर, थैंक यू. विल कम बैक in the second part.
We'll do it. We'll do it. Yeah. Not tomorrow, but sometime. Tomorrow there is some other meeting.
Yeah, we will do it. No, I'm meaning
We'll
it.
do it later.